Hey, I'm Vego and this is Psychedelic Actualization. On this channel we talk about topics like self-realization, self-actualization and working with psychedelics to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. So if you're interested in these kinds of topics, subscribe to the channel. And today I have a good friend, Wolf, besides me once again, and we will talk about a topic. He introduced himself in the last video, in this one here, where he shared his 5-MeO DMT experience. Really nice video, really valuable perspective, nice trip report. You can definitely watch it. And today he is here once again and we will have a little conversation about the topics: are psychedelic experiences always connected to spirituality? Which is a really interesting thought. So enjoy! And thank you for joining the channel.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Always good to have collaborations and to share perspectives. So, yeah, what comes to mind when you hear this question?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is a straight up answer which says no. There is definitely a lot of use of psychedelics that is not related to spirituality. There is recreational use. There is use in party life, there is abuse. People say often that psychedelics aren't addictive, they are not addictive substances, but I do believe that you can get addicted to the behavior surrounding psychedelics. So I will speak a little bit for my own personal experience. I very much appreciate you guys' input on this, so make sure to leave a comment if you agree or disagree. For myself, I know that I love psychedelics and they are incredibly profound, powerful tools that can bring about altered states of consciousness which are so much more interesting than the day-to-day consciousness, in my opinion. You know, like LSD, for example, I feel like a little child rediscovering the world. It's like, wow, a tree, it looks like I've never seen it before, or the sun, it feels so much different on my skin than it does when I'm sober, right? So everything seems like so interesting, so new, and since I'm a very perceptive person, I'm highly sensitive, I perceive things in a lot more detail, and it's extremely satisfying for me to be able to perceive so much more than I'm usually able to, right? So my day-to-day existence can get very bland in comparison to this, you know, perception on steroids almost. That is kind of how it feels in any possible way. You know, it's not only like the visuals, it's also like the emotional depth, experiencing music, like everything is just so much more intense. And so I have a tendency to slightly abuse psychedelics in a way that, okay, I would take it to escape. You know, if I take a tap of acid, I know it's 12 hours of woo, I'm on a trip. And of course you can use it for introspection, but sometimes I can get lost in how amazingly fun it is, and then I lose track of my intention for it and if I actually am using it for introspection or not. Actually, no, it's more like just recreational because I enjoy it. And there is a danger there. So in my personal case, I need to be aware. Every time I am about to use a psychedelic, I ask myself, is this because I really think I need it right now, or because it's going to help me with a problem that I'm currently struggling with, or some insight? Or is it because I just simply want to escape the mundane feeling I'm currently struggling with? So that is something to keep in mind.
That's a really good point, actually, because I never experienced it like this, for like going into psychedelics for recreational use, but it's really definitely possible, and I can imagine it in my mind when you don't have that intention, when you really just do it to escape, and then you have this fun experience with this, which is also kind of related to spirituality, but also in a sense not, because it's an unconscious behavior in a sense. So that's a really good point to keep in mind. And I think, yeah, for this question, are psychedelics always related to spirituality? There are many different branches of this tree we could go into, because there is this party mode kind of thing, which could be escape, could be a spiritual experience. There's the abuse of the psychedelics, where the boundary is like really blurry, like at which point is it an abusive kind of behavior and an unconscious kind of behavior that is not healthy anymore? Is it when you do it once a week, couple times a week, once a month? Could be even
once a year if it's...
could it even be like once a year if you do it unconsciously? So that's kind of an interesting topic where we could talk a lot about. Or what came to my mind when I first thought about that question is I go into these experiences always kind of with the intention related to personal development, to myself, or to spirituality. And even then, when I go into these deep, profound experiences, I have sometimes experiences that feel so alien and so kind of other that they don't really feel divine, or like they don't really feel like they're related to spirituality. And that's kind of interesting for me, at least, in regards to that question. For example, when I go into a mushroom experience, and sometimes it's so weird, you know, it's you meet this dark mushroom lord, or you just throw up a couple of times, and you're confused, it doesn't feel good, and you're like, what is happening right here? This was horrible. This is like the perspective that I had this thought that, oh, these experiences are not related to spirituality because they feel so other than myself. They feel so alien, kind of, that they are in different dimensions, but also kind of so impersonal, so not related to myself and to my spirituality. But also there's this other perspective that came to my mind too, that these experiences, and of course the experiences that give us this enlightened state of consciousness kind of, and these insights about spirituality, both can be looked at in a spiritual perspective and in a spiritual way. Like even, like what does it do to your peace and to your freedom and to your well-being, or like your happiness in a spiritual kind of sense, if you meet this dark mushroom lord or this DMT entity that is kind of talking to you and you don't understand, you're like, no, this doesn't feel good. Even these experiences that are hard to integrate are spiritual experiences. And even to come to your point, which is like, my perspective is kind of like every experience of life is a spiritual experience. Every experience is like, there is no such thing as mundane experiences, or like, yeah, every experience is so full of wonder and full of awe. It's just like, do we choose to perceive the beauty and the awe and the wonder, or do we choose to be ignorant? And even there, it's like, are these experiences that you do for this, for the escape, or for the partying, or for like whatever, for the abuse, are these even spiritual experiences? Because you go into a different state of consciousness, it does something with you, and yeah, you have a spiritual experience all the time. But it's like, yeah, it's a really twisted topic kind of, because it has a lot to do with our self-awareness of it.
Of course.
It's all about this self-awareness kind of. Am I aware that I'm abusing it? Am I aware that I'm using it for spiritual experiences?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that comes to mind. I talked to a very spiritually advanced person a few months back, who used to be active in ayahuasca retreat center, and they were doing ayahuasca like almost every other day, right? And at some point, the spiritual teacher, the master, calls them for a group gathering, and he tells them, hey, are you guys here for the spiritual development, or are you just chasing the drug? Because at some point it became clear that the usage of the substance was no longer really for spiritual purposes, but more because it was such a profound state of altered consciousness that they wanted more of that. And he told me that back in the day when all this medicine was not as readily available, it was used in the tribes to initiate people into a godlike experience almost just once in their lifetime. So they take plant medicine once in their lifetime so they can see what's possible. Then they come back to earth and then they have to do the work in order for them to achieve this sense of wonder in this life on this earth. So it's basically just showing them a glimpse of what's possible, showing them the reality of what you can achieve, and then coming back to earth and then doing all the hard work to get there. But nowadays, all these substances are so readily available that we can take them at any time we want. Back in the day, it was rare. It was not it was not a commodity, but psychedelics have or are slowly becoming more of a commodity that people use with less intention, with less sacredness. And that is, I think, a danger to be aware of, especially for myself, that I treat them with the respect these psychedelics deserve, and that I take the lessons that I learn from an experience like this and really work with them to the fullest in my waking life. Because otherwise it becomes a way to achieve altered states of consciousness as like a shortcut. But there is no shortcuts in life. So you can try to reach enlightenment using psychedelics and they will get you there really fast. But it's also a shortcut which can have a negative impact on other things further down the line. One of the things that he told me is that, for example, use of acid or LSD can have a very negative influence on your aura. It can make your aura more heavy. It can make you carry more heaviness with you. And so the more psychedelics you use, the more LSD you take, the heavier your aura becomes, until you will realize that you have been abusing the psychedelic and not really using it for real spiritual purposes. So this is definitely something to be aware of on your journey in psychedelic exploration, because there is definitely danger there. Of course, it's our own responsibility, and I came to learn this luckily fairly early on in my journey, that okay, I need to be careful because I can get lost in this very fast. So I need to be really aware whenever I use a psychedelic that it's with the right intentions. And so I ask myself every time, is this really what I need right now, or am I just doing it to feel different? And that's important to keep in mind.
That's an interesting perspective. Like, I have a slightly different perspective on all the points you shared, and you shared like from this teacher. But it's definitely nice. Thank you for sharing. It's definitely good to be aware of this perspective also. Because, for example, I've heard like in different traditions and communities, in the indigenous communities, it's like regularly they drink 2 times a week. And it's also like, do they do it because of the spiritual purposes, or do they do it like for routine? They grew up with it, and it's like kind of their way of life. Or the Huni Queen tribe, it's like they're drinking ayahuasca as kind of part of their life, just like. But also with the LSD and everything, it's just good to be aware of your intentions. Good to be aware of the integration. Yeah, I would like wrap it up with the points of. Awareness of the balance and awareness of intentions and awareness of integration, because that is the most important part, to integrate these experiences for our own spiritual development. Even if we decide to go in a psychedelic experience with the intention of partying, we can still like integrate it in a sense that it's enjoyable, that it's not in an abusive way, that it's not an escape, but that it's a conscious use for fun. Or we can integrate the experience of meeting the darkness and going through hell. It's like, that's also an experience I can integrate into myself, and then like, yeah, reach that state of peace and that state of self-understanding and divine love in a sober state of being. So it's a huge topic, and we kind of drifted off from the question of are psychedelics always related to spirituality?
Not necessarily, right? Because
But
if you mention the
yeah, it's good. It's very
chasing
good.
an altered state of consciousness,
Yeah. Do we
without-
chase the altered state of
Uh-huh.
consciousness if we use psychedelics? Also an interesting question, but not part of this video, but another one is like, can we reach these states of consciousness in a sober state of being through intense meditation, through yoga? Because some experiences are so far out, so other dimensional. It's interesting, this question, like, can we reach it in a sober state of being? Can we practice so much and like open ourselves to these other dimensions so much that we have these experiences in a darkness retreat, for example? There are other ways, or with holotropic breath work, or is it just the way of the psychedelics that can like get us so far out? But that's a topic for another video, and it's like really interesting also in combination to spiritual practice, because it's also a highly sensitive topic in the spiritual and psychedelic community. Is it like this? No? Is it? But I would say we can all agree psychedelics are a good tool for at least getting some insights in spiritual development and in self-realization. And the most important part is the integration into our day-to-day experience, because we cannot be high all the time. We can be high on oxygen, and like I sometimes feel like high in my sober state of being, like we can raise our consciousness to that level and practice self-awareness, but we cannot take psychedelics all the time. That's not the solution. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective. It was a very interesting talk, very interesting topic. Really, I would love to hear your opinion about it. Write a comment about your opinion about this kind of question. It's a huge topic. It's a really interesting, deep topic. What are your experiences with it? Have you experienced it in a way that you felt like you abused these medicines? Or did you feel like you were always kind of treating them with respect and not doing them like too often, and always like listening to your resonance and to your feeling of when is the right time to go into it and why you're going into it? So I would love to hear. So if you're interested in these kinds of topics, subscribe to the channel, spirituality, psychedelics, self-development, and also subscribe to his channel, Flow of Consciousness. Thank you for sharing your presence and your perspective. And I will see you in the next one.
Namaste.